And we are live. Welcome back to the Stokastic DFS channel. It's the Mats today. It is college football Saturday. Real football here for college. Preseason football still here for the NFL, but we got an exciting 8-game docket. 2 early, 6 late, and of course, the preseason pioneer, Matt Gajewski, is here. The Sultan of Summer, the Colossus of Camp, all the nicknames. Follow him at Matt_Gajewski. I've seen all over Twitter these huge wins from people using your projections for DFS and for betting, man. It's got to feel good. You're doing awesome work. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Wish it was me, but congrats to those people. I mean, there were some big scores out there. I saw a 50K and a 25K. Don't have the names right off the top of my head in front of me, but congrats to you guys. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. We're talking preseason. We're in the weeds, but you allow us to do what we love. So thank you, everyone. I'm excited to get into this. It's our last big slate.
The last big preseason slate, the last day where us getting ready for season-long fantasy football or DFS, crossing our fingers that none of the big names, maybe they don't play at all, or they play very little. Of course, we're praying for no injuries for anyone, of course, but we got a ton of top options here. I was watching your top plays video earlier today, and we do have some teams who are kind of spread out in terms of skill position play and quarterback play, but some are condensed in terms of opportunity. Those are obviously who we're going to take advantage of here. Is there anybody right off the bat, just like one or two players that are just, these players are my top plays to break the slate?
We got to look at the Rams. I feel like there's 2 or 3 teams every time they're on the slate. Immediately they jump to the top just because of their coaching philosophies. The Packers are one they previously played this week. The Rams are another. You just don't see Stafford. You don't see any starters. And McVay takes it a step further. A lot of times we don't even see some of the premier backups. We usually don't see John Wolford. We don't see some of the role players, like even Tutu Atwell has been on the shelf, not because he's a starter, but he plays a role. And if you're going to be on the field for McVay, he doesn't want to chance anything. With all that said, Bryce Perkins, he could play 100% of the snaps. He's extremely mobile, very mobile quarterback, came out of Virginia, where he had over 700 yards in back-to-back seasons. This guy, with every single snap and his ability to run, he should shoot to the top of your board. He is on the 2-game slate, so he's not on the night slate, just remember that. But if you're playing the 2-gamer this afternoon, he is an awesome play.
Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat that there's some blurriness. Yeah, through it might just be the internet kind of correcting our call, making sure it goes through, but we'll get it fixed up for you in no time. And that's my dude. I was propping him up on our last Live Before Lock that we did together last week. I'm excited to see him. Really anyone with rushing upside. So you could look at somebody like, of course, Malik Willis, who could get some playing time, Trace McSorley. And yeah, before we get off and roll, I'm already into it, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Really helps us out when you comment below. Say hello in the chat as well. We're out here doing the summer grind for you guys. And also hit that notification bell because it lets you know when we're going live for shows like this. Like I saw that we had this for 3 p.m. Of course, we got you guys covered before the early slate. Don't worry about it, but we corrected that. We're here now, of course. You ready to get into this one?
Yeah, really ready. Let's do it.
Let's roll. Quarterback position. We already gave you a little tease. Bryce Perkins for the LA Rams, rushing quarterback, undrafted out of UVA. He's a top option. I talked about some players who just throwing out a few already. Who other than Perkins sticks out to you when we're talking about this full slate?
We'll just talk about the slates together. I think it'll make it easier, but just know there is a differentiator between the two. You mentioned Malik Willis briefly. We know what he can do with his legs. He doesn't have the same playing time projection as a Bryce Perkins necessarily, but he's going to be out there for at least a half and maybe more. In preseason week 1, they decided to trot him out there for a little bit of the second half and then pulled him out when Vrabel got pissed. He wouldn't throw. He was just running.
Oh, so,
yeah. I mean, it's great for DFS. I understand why Vrabel was mad. He actually wants to see what Willis can do. But Woodside's been maybe the worst quarterback in the preseason. Lofty pulled some pretty alarming stats, sub 50% completion percentage for Woodside. I think you got to go out there and see what Malik Willis has if you're the Titans. And lucky for us, that mobility is key for DFS. So he's always going to be near the top. You also mentioned Trace McSorley. This is a spot where we haven't seen Kyler or Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy was dealing with a minor injury, but again, this is sort of a Sean McVay philosophy. They don't play a lot of the starters in Arizona or meaningful backups. So even if Colt plays, which I don't think he does, it's not going to be much. And they haven't really used Jarek Arantano, their fourth stringer. He's just a camp body because of the injuries they've had in camp. McSorley's played 100 snaps. The only other quarterback with snaps, Garantano, has played 34. And we know McSorley also has that mobility. So on these big slates, I'm trying to take the quarterbacks that are not only going to see at least a half, but are also mobile. And those top three guys all have it.
It's all about volume in fantasy football, and rushing volume is even better for quarterbacks than it is for a flex player. And then you add on the fact that you've got that added upside, floor and ceiling for players that rush. When there's uncertainty in terms of snap counts, the rushing opportunity becomes even more important. Moving down the list here, this is mostly the night slate. Yes, that is. I guess Desmond Ridder would be another early slate rushing opportunity guy that you would pick out, but Baltimore's got Tyler Huntley and Anthony Brown pretty high on your list. What about Skylar Thompson for the Miami Dolphins? Talk to me about him.
I'm glad you brought him up. This is a really key situation. Miami, they don't really talk to you about what they're going to do in the preseason. McDaniel just is out here telling us riddles, but I think they're going to treat this game closer to preseason week 1. In preseason week 1, you didn't see Tua, you didn't see Teddy Bridgewater. Skylar Thompson played every single snap. And then they kind of treated week 2 as their dress rehearsal, where Skylar only got 15 snaps. Bridgewater and Tua, they each played a fair amount in that game. But I think this is going to be closer to week 1. So Skylar Thompson right now is projected around a half of football for us on the back end, but there's a range of outcomes for him. He could play the entire game like he did in week 1. We just can't project it because the coaching staff hasn't told us, but just know that that's in there. So for tournaments, I think he's an excellent play. If you did project him for every single snap, he'd be up there right behind Perkins. Not quite as mobile, but he's still pretty good with his legs.
4.91 40. That's okay, but his speed score is right there at league average. Playerprofiler.com has him best comparable to Nathan Peterman. Superstar Nathan Peterman.
He does not play like Nathan Peterman. Thank goodness.
Yeah. I think it's just the metrics combination more than the play style.
I didn't know he was that slow. I don't remember the 40 time off the top of my head. So he went to Kansas State, which is a very methodical run heavy offense. And they use the quarterback and a lot of read stuff there. Mm-hmm. Man, I am shocked to hear he ran that slow.
Well, here are some decent metrics that he did have. His college QBR of 76.2. That's upper percentile. He actually had an 80th percentile yards per attempt. Again, Kansas State, decent competition, not like premier tier competition, but 9.1 yards per attempt. That'll get you drafted, right? 7th round pick this year. If he's got the requisite playing time, then I think this is a really interesting option, especially when you're considering him as a GPP play. Because below that, it kind of seems like now you're getting into murkiness in terms of both opportunity and expected efficiency, right? Jake Browning, that's the early slate. Kyle Trask is next. Kellen Mond, also for Minnesota. Anybody else stick out below Thompson?
Steve McGee in the chat brings up someone I wanted to talk about. It's Fields. Supposed to play a full half. The quote from that staff was actually he could play up to a half. So we don't have him projected for the full half, just like that. The way he said it, up to a half, suggests to me that he could be pulled before that marker. And, it's probably poor play that gets into a full half. A lot of times you see these guys, if they go out there and they execute the game plan, they'll get pulled early. So that is a worry for me with Fields and why he doesn't project quite as well as some of those other guys. He's not projected at a half of us on the back end. But again, that was another coaching staff quote. Up to a half is possible for the Bears.
All right, let's just play the hypothetical game then. Justin Fields plays a full half. Where does he stand in your quarterback rankings? Would you have to hear something else in order to assume that could even happen? What occurs if that actually happens, that plays out?
If he plays a full half, the only players he's behind are Perkins and McSorley. So he's another guy that's pretty good for GPPs, kind of like Skylar Thompson, because the range of outcomes is wider. Like, for example, I think it's much wider than a guy like Trask. I think we kind of know how much Trask is going to play. It's less than what we've seen in previous games because Brady's going to get a little bit. They're going to use their actual players. And then these other quarterbacks, like I think with this situation in Fields, you could see a half and just the caliber quarterback he is. He's better than everyone else essentially we're talking about talent-wise. So him going up against backups, even with just a half, would put him right behind McSorley, right behind Perkins.
Okay. God, I'm looking at this offensive line as I'm getting ready for the
The
regular season.
Bears.
What a joke. What a joke of an offensive line. I mean, there's a couple teams down there at the bottom, but it doesn't really matter who they're putting out there at quarterback. They're going to be running for their absolute life this season.
I feel so bad for Fields, man.
I'm hoping that there's like what I've been saying all offseason is a baseline level of competency that I didn't feel like we saw last year with Matt Nagy, just from like a game scheme standpoint. But if your offensive line is getting bum rushed every play, does it even matter? I digress. We can talk about go ahead.
I would love if they ran like the year one Cliff Kingsbury offense, where Arizona had deficiencies on the offensive line. They just got like people were joking, calling it the horizontal raid. Yes,
yeah, that's a good point.
It was kind of like a neutered air raid, but their offensive line was so bad those years. Like you kind of have to get the ball out early if you're just under pressure, you're under duress. So I hope they use, I don't know if they will. Again, it's the Bears, but hope they use some of those mesh concepts, get the ball out of Fields' hand fast and focus on that, but who knows?
That would not be dumb. And the other thing that offense did in Kyler's first year in the league is they basically were like first read, second read, scramble, which would be great for Fields from a fantasy perspective. They kind of gave him free reign to run, which worked out everywhere except for the red zone. They were awful Kyler's first year in the red zone. If Justin Fields gets to that level, we'll consider that a huge win. That's enough of a digression. Anybody else at the quarterback position, interesting GPP plays or somebody that stands out that we have not spoken about at all yet?
That's really where I'm focusing. Once you get past those guys, you're talking about a lot of timeshares. And, Fields is pretty down there in the projections, but I think he's completely fine. One other guy I'll at least bring up is Sam Howell for his rushing ability in Washington. I don't think we see a ton of their premier players. Like, I don't think we see a lot of Wentz. Heineke's a known commodity there. Howell has played 61 snaps. He's had at least 30 in 2 games. He's still going to be in a timeshare. There's 3 quarterbacks there. But once you get past those first couple options we already talked about, starts to get a little risky, a little thin. But for tournaments, he has rushing equity.
Interesting. Sam Howell, another player who player profiler compares to Sam Darnold. I don't know how you get there.
How? He ran for like 800 yards last year.
Yeah.
Is it just exclusively on workout metrics?
It might. I thought it had to be more than that, but it might just be workout metrics. It's a fun way to talk about these players who we don't otherwise have good reads on in terms of their play style, but I'm not reading anything into that at all. It's really about how much playing time do we expect for them today, and for flex players, of course, it's condensed opportunities. I think that pretty much rounds out the quarterback position. If you have any questions in chat, definitely let us know. We'll round back at the very end. Do want to tell you guys about our presenting sponsor today, Prize Picks. You've probably heard about it on a previous show, but Prize Picks is such a fun way to play player-based contests, and we've got a great offer for you as well over there. If you're new over there, they've got just a dizzying amount of different ways to play over there, different sports. If you're in on the college football streets, the preseason streets, of course, they've got NFL futures, video games. I've seen disc golf, craziness. And promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, gets you a $100 first match deposit bonus. No sharks, optimizers. A 5-player lineup can net you up to 10x your entry fee. If you look at the video description below, we've got a link for you over on Prize Picks. That, again, is promo code AWESEMO for that first match deposit bonus. We move to the running back position. Oh, I see the Ravens QB picture. We talked about it in a minute, but we've got 2 players, Huntley and Brown. How are you seeing that play out, Matt, before we move on to running back?
Yeah, we kind of glossed over them, but they should be right there just behind Malik Willis. They both have solid mobility. It's not quite as dynamic as Malik. Like I think Malik is a little closer to like a Lamar level. Huntley and Brown, both mobile for sure, but more scramblers. They're both going to get a round a half, which is kind of that Malik Willis territory. So I think they're both correctly projected, just a tick below Malik Willis. And for those of you that don't have this up, it goes Bryce Perkins far and away number 1. McSorley's kind of in a tier 2 by himself. Then it's Malik slightly ahead of Huntley and Anthony Brown. They're right there, top 5 options.
Gotcha. Okay, and we'll do a better job of kind of separating out the early from the late slate. I understand that. So the early slate is just two games: Falcons, Jaguars, and Bengals, Rams. And so when we go running back, let's start there. In this early slate, we don't have. If you look at the full slate, I think the highest up there would be Chris Evans of the Bengals, and then Mekhi Sargent of the Jaguars. If we're looking early slate, compare those two for me.
It's not the best running back slate. You don't have any really condensed situation. The two players you mentioned are my two favorites. I think with the Bengals, Chris Evans is pretty solid because of the pass catching skill set he provides, which in preseason is key. If you can get a couple of receptions, even more important because you're not playing full snaps. So Evans stands out. I think Trevion Williams would be an excellent pivot off him. He's not going to get as much work in the pass game, but he has more upside for carries, and he's the more likely one to score a touchdown. Their snaps have been razor close. Trevion Williams, 53 snaps, Evans, 47. So the pass catching, just a very slight tiebreaker between the two, but they're both top three options. And then Sargent, he's the other player to mention here. Jacksonville has three running backs, and Sargent's been pretty clearly ahead of them in terms of snap counts. He's not ahead of them on the depth chart, but 43 snaps for Sargent, 36 for Snoop Connor, 28 for Raekwon Armstead. We're not expecting to see Travis Etienne or the starters today. So that kind of narrows things in Jacksonville. The Rams could be narrow. We're not sure about Kyren Williams' workload. So this is an uncertain spot where maybe you could look at Trey Ragas. Kyren Williams had a camp injury, so he's supposed to play today, but you never know with McVay. Just monitor Kyren. So Ragas could be a guy that would shoot up if there were to be news, but we'll have to wait and see. Atlanta, I'm not interested in. They just have so many running backs on that roster. They have 6.
That was going to be my next question. You know, we see some of these, especially in the NFC South. Like, I feel like the Saints are another team where you're just like, how in the world do we pick any of these skill position players? But no Atlanta Falcons player, even if you look at the full slate, they're all outside the top 15, 20 running backs. You got no one. The Rams are one that I was very interested in now that we have a little bit more clarity. I'm trying to look down this list. I feel like that was enough for the early slate. So let's now focus on the later one. I think Jerome Ford and Jason Huntley are up there, but Hassan Haskins is a player you've been highlighting a bunch this preseason just because of the opportunity he's getting today in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, you're not going to see Derrick Henry. Dontrell Hilliard's been in bubble wrap, dealt with an injury early in camp. And then they have a bunch of like specialists. They have fullbacks like Troy Carter. They have special teamers like Trenton Cannon. Like Trenton Cannon doesn't play on regular offensive snaps. He's a special teamer. That leaves just Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut. And Haskins has been working well ahead of him. 57 snaps for Haskins, 41 for Chestnut. I think this is the most condensed backfield on the slate. So I'm still going to go back to Haskins. He's a little pass catching upside. He's a big bruising back out of Michigan. I think he should be near the top of your list. It's not as clear as the Bryce Perkins. Like Bryce Perkins is far away the best quarterback. He happens to be on the early slate, but there's no clear tier break like that. But I still think he deserves to be at the top.
In our DK projections, obviously we have some quarterbacks projected for double-digit points, fantasy points, but there are only 2 players who you've got currently projected for double-digit or more DK fantasy points: Hassan Haskins and Arizona's Keontae Ingram. Keontae Ingram, low-key, I think could actually have some receiving role for the Cardinals this year. What's his situation like going up against the Titans? You're probably not going to play. I almost said you're probably not going to play both of them because you don't usually play 2 running backs in regular season DFS. But do you even care about that if they're clearly the most projected players at their position? Are you fine playing them both?
Yeah, because we're more concerned with playing time.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing here. And there's hidden upside in this situation. Jonathan Ward is questionable. That could narrow this to 3. And then how much Eno Benjamin and Darrell Williams do we see? Darrell Williams has played 4 snaps this preseason. He was banged up earlier in camp. So Ingram has a high floor to begin with. He's played the most snaps for this team. You mentioned the pass catching. He's a sneaky good pass catcher. And then there's that hidden upside where if Ward misses this game, you could be in an even more condensed situation. So I like Keontae Ingram a lot. I think he's my favorite running back for that reason. I think Haskins will be a little more owned. You could get potential edge with Keontae.
Interesting. Now, as we head into the mid-tier, it can get real murky real fast. Below players like Ingram, I'm seeing like Jaquan Hardy for Denver, Kennedy Brooks for Philadelphia, John Kelly, the former Ram, now in Cleveland, might get increased opportunity here. And then Mike Boone, Keenan Nwangu in Minnesota. Talk to me about these mid-tier options. You got kind of, it's the projections really start to flatten out at this point for you. And so again, it comes down to opportunity, but where is the upside here in the 7 to 8 fantasy point projected tier?
Yeah, just to go a little bit, we'll go team by team, skipping the ones that are really crowded. But you mentioned Denver. They're not going to play Javonte or Melvin. They cut Stevie Scott and signed Divine Ogzigbo this week. I don't know how much he plays. He's already been cut by a team. So Jaquan Hardy's played 37 snaps. That's pretty solid. Decent pass catching upside for him. He's slightly ahead of Mike Boone for me. Kene Nwangwu, he's mainly a special teamer for Minnesota, but they kind of been trotting him out, seeing if he could potentially play their third running back slot. I think he's interesting. He'll be in a committee with at least 3 backs, maybe 4 if Madison plays. India's 5. They're too crowded. Tampa Bay, Fournette played in their last game, and I'm anticipating him playing today because Brady's going to play, and maybe Giovanni Bernard plays. He's been banged up. So that kind of increases their backfield, which we previously liked. Cleveland is kind of sneaky condensed. Chubb and Hunt probably not playing. Demetric Felton's playing receiver. That leaves Jerome Ford and John Kelly. So they technically have a lot of running backs on the roster, but I don't think a lot of them are actually going to be playing in this game. So with Dearness Johnson kind of in bubble wrap, just 12 snaps off preseason, it's sneaky, decent spot for Ford and Kelly. I think in the GPP range we're talking about, where there's very narrow projection differences, Jerome Ford and John Kelly could be very interesting plays.
I'm looking at the chat here talking about, I think Chandler gets a lot of run. I think they're saying Ty Chandler gets a lot of run.
Yeah, he's been banged up, so I don't know about that.
And also there's been some weird reporting out of Minnesota. I remember early in the offseason, they were saying that Alexander Madison was actually going to have sort of like a hybrid role on this team. But then later in training camp, they were saying that he's been beat out and outplayed by Ty Chandler.
Ty Chandler's like 26.
I'm not seeing it either. And you're actually projecting Chandler right now as the 3rd most productive running back on that roster. Playing against Denver today, Keenan Nwangu, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and also Bryant Kobach are the players you expect to have more playing time, I presume, and that's why they're projected a little bit higher.
Yeah, that Ty Chandler's just been dealing with an injury. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I think they would maybe trot him out a little more. They've been pretty consistent. Like, they haven't really given anyone a stronger workload. Nwangwu, 33 snaps, Kobach, 34. Chandler's at 20, but again, he was injured. So I don't know how much we can read into that. So they're kind of just splitting it up evenly in Minnesota.
The Bears, anybody of note? Darrington Evans.
He's been a darling for us in the past, but the Bears are expected to play their starters, which means I think we see a little Montgomery. Herbert, I don't know what happened where he got carted off, but he's already practicing again, and he'll be out there. They have 5 backs now, so they're a little tougher to target. And I think that's most of the teams. Miami has a ton of backs. I don't think we're getting there. Oh, Philly's actually kind of condensed. We can talk Philly.
Yeah.
Miles
Brooks. Yeah.
Yeah, these guys project well. You won't see Miles Sanders. I don't think we're going to see much, if any, Boston Scott or Gainwell. Neither of them played in week 1. And then Jason Huntley played 41 snaps in that game. He's more of your pass catching archetype compared to Brooks. Brooks is like an early down grinder, single-digit catches in his college seasons. So Huntley, because of the pass catching upside, he's pretty good too. I like Huntley.
I'm looking here. Deion Jackson, we got to talk about. The only Indy running back you have in the top 15 playing against a Buccaneers offense. You know, we don't read into game script in preseason. We mostly talk about snap share for obvious reasons, but maybe a little, the first team offense for Tampa Bay comes out, scores 2 touchdowns. And so Indy just naturally has to play a little bit more up-tempo style. Deion Jackson, I presume the player you project to have the most touches in the backfield for this team. Any upside there?
It's just tough because they have so many backs. You're looking at 5 of them. So to me, I would rather just get to a more narrow backfield. And at best, it's going to be 4. That would be if Nyheim Hines doesn't play. He's probably the best of this group, but still only 31 snaps on the season. Devontae Price is second at 26. I think you can just find more condensed playing time elsewhere.
Fair enough. Yeah. Rashad White playing it all today in that same game?
Yeah, I think he will. The only issue I have with that is they're going to play Fournette. Brady's going to play. I don't know for how long. They've been kind of quiet about this. So how much Rashad White work does Fournette end up stealing? Because Rashad White, his snaps have been kind of buoyed by the fact that they've missed Bernard and Fournette for periods of this preseason. If Fournette plays, that increases it to 4 backs, just a little less narrow than some other situations as well.
Got you. You mentioned Darrington Evans. How are you feeling about him? Is he kind of just mid-tier for you? And then Kyle was asking in chat about the Ravens backfield, particularly Tyler Beatty.
Yeah, Evans is a little lower for me, just a crowded situation. And then for Baltimore, you have 4 backs as well, assuming Mike Davis plays. So again, Beatty's the best play of that group, but I still question the upside here. Beatty would be the only one I think is worth a tournament flyer. And that's because his profile is a pass catching back, caught over 40 balls with Missouri last year. It's a little scat back, but the pass catching upside is enough to put in your GPP run.
Oh, this hurts. Chris in chat, I wonder if Laviska can do something today in Showdown. We're just praying for Laviska Shenault to do anything in preseason week 3 Showdown. Just remember this when the next time our preseason darling doesn't live up to the hype in the regular season as well. Like, Damian Pearson, players like that skyrocketing up your draft board. Not saying they're going to be bad picks. I'm just saying it doesn't always end up as fun.
No, it's sad.
Yeah. Anything else on the running back position? I think we're about ready to move on now.
Yeah, I think we're good. If you have questions about a specific player, just let us know. Thank you for reading those, Matt. You've been doing a great job of it. Appreciate it.
Of course, guys. And make sure you get all the help you need from Stokastic.com for your fantasy football drafts. Working over there at the fantasy football and best ball side of things. We've been on it all season long. Matt's been helping us out before, of course, just grinding away at this. It's in full swing, which means it's time to dominate your draft. There is no better way to start that than with our fantasy football and best ball YouTube channels. Click below in the description to subscribe to those channels. Turn on those notifications over there for daily videos from our team of fantasy football experts that will give you an edge when you need to draft this season. And every day with, Underdog and sponsors like Drafters as well, every day can be draft day. We got you hooked up with some promos. Check it out, the Stokastic Fantasy Football and Best Ball channels today. The wide receiver position, we got our boy Lance McCutcheon up top. Preseason darling Lance McCutcheon. Been playing a ton, and obviously that's what matters the most here. But you also have some other Rams up near the top here. Austin Trammell, Landon Akers. I presume that's because there's so few options in that wide receiver core that they're just going to play a ton this final preseason game for the Rams. Yeah?
Yeah, 100%. If you're playing the early slate, I think you want to get 2 of these guys, unless you're just playing large field tournaments. McCutcheon has an 81% route rate. That is unbelievably high for the preseason. Truly unbelievably high. Trammell's at 64%. He's second. Landon Akers, he's at 60. So all 3 of these guys, immense upside. I think you can target any of the 3 with a preference towards McCutcheon, and I'm trying to get at least one of them. The other guy I'll mention is Jacob Harris. I believe he is tight end at eligibility. I'm not sure on FanDuel what it is, but he played 40 snaps in their most recent game. That was only behind McCutcheon and Trammell. So he's technically a wide receiver now, but regardless, he's a solid player to look at.
You also have some Jacksonville wide receivers. Again, we're starting with the early slate here. Jeff Cotton Jr. and Tim Jones. If you look at the full slate of projections, they're both within your top 10 currently. So they're playing the Falcons in Atlanta. Maybe it plays a little bit faster just because you're in the dome, but we're not reading too much into that. Can you decide between the two, or is it just one of 2, or will you play both in some lineups?
I'm focusing on just playing one of them and prioritizing the Rams situation, but I'm also playing 20 lineups on the main slate. It's in 150s. I think you can get to 2 of these guys, especially if it's a 2-game slate in the morning. So, you're probably naturally going to run into some of that anyway, but Jacksonville, despite having 10 receivers on the roster, For whatever reason, they're giving Cotton and Tim Jones full run out there. 54% route rate for Cotton, 52% for Tim Jones. Nobody else is above 29%. So for whatever reason, these two guys are getting full run. They're getting the full tryout opportunities for Jacksonville. And I don't see any reason that changes. Because of that, they're both pretty good plays here. Just a tick behind the Rams guys.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just looking. Again, this is all because of snap share condensation, or for the most part. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your top 7 projected wide receivers from this early slate. That's why we were kind of meh about the running backs when we were talking about early slate, because now like we actually have some target and snap share condensed offense here in the beginning. Talk to me about Cincinnati real quick. I see Kwame Lassiter and Kendrick Pryor atop your list. Anybody at all on the Falcons interest you?
Yeah, so as you can probably gather, the projections closely follow route rate, snap rate, target rates. Kwame Lassiter leads the Bengals 61% route rate. Kendrick Pryor second, 54%. I think Lassiter's fine. He's right up there with the Jacksonville receivers. Kendrick Pryor just a tick below him. He's blocking on a lot of snaps late in the game. Atlanta's a complete mess. They've been playing a lot of their starters in the preseason. Got Drake London hurt. Brian Edwards has been banged up himself, but they still have 8 receivers. So
you mean Terrell Owens?
Terrell Owens is a freak. Unbelievable.
Thought that's Brian Edwards. Well, hold on. But Terrell Owens, people think he is like a meme. Terrell Owens was unbelievable at football. I know he made the Hall and everything, like he got his accolades, but that dude was outrageously good. Just sat behind Jerry Rice, literally the best receiver of all time, and so he took a few years to break out.
Yeah, he was a wagon.
Not Brian Edwards. Okay.
Not Brian Edwards. Frank Darby leads this team with a 30% route rate, which, I mean, McCutcheon playing 80% of the routes, I'll take him 1 for 1. Atlanta is the last one on this for playing time. They're the lowest.
Makes sense here. Chris in chat says T.O. ahead of his time. Producer Ty. T.O. was also psycho. Love that. That guy would have been a social media superstar if he had played during today's era. All right. We're moving on here. This is the later slate now, the 6-game later slate. The highest you have is Mike Harley Jr. from Cleveland, and then Jamarcus Bradley as well. Again, consolidated options. Fifth rounder Immer Smith-Marset and Olabisi Johnson. These are players who have actually contributed a bit in regular season play for Minnesota going up against the Denver Broncos in the late game. Any of those really stick out to you as interesting plays in tournaments?
Minnesota's fairly thin. Unfortunately, we don't have like a New England or a Ram situation on the late night slate at receiver, at least right now. Always watch for news because you never know. 6 receivers in Minnesota. You mentioned the guys I'm particularly looking at. BC Johnson's getting a lot of run in the preseason, which surprised me because, to your point, he has played meaningful snaps for this team in the past. 53% route rate for BC, 52% for Amir Smith-Marset. That's pretty good in the context of the late slate because we don't have any 80, 90% route rate guys. And they, I think, are priorities. And I'm sorry, who were the other players you mentioned?
The Cleveland players. It would be, Mike Harley Jr., Jamarcus Bradley atop your list.
Another team with 6 healthy receivers. So you can tell 6 is kind of the most condensed we're getting on the late slate. And because of that, I think you can look at these players. Mike Harley has a 69% route rate, which is very high for the late slate. Jamarcus Bradley's at 47%. These are 2 solid players as well because we don't have the New England, the LA Rams situation.
Best ball moderate asking in the chat, Hassan Haskins, over under 6.1 fantasy points. I think you're probably smashing the over, no?
Yeah. When you, I didn't know if you were going to ask me about Prize Picks. That was the one I was going to talk about.
Oh, let's do it. We naturally just kind of get into some of these Prize Picks plays. Hit me with one of your best bets on Prize Picks today.
Yeah, I have 3, and one of them just got brought up in chat. Thank you, Best Ball Moderate was on that. I also think the rushing for him is solid. You are not a plant,
Best Ball Moderate. You just happen to transition us well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he's over here transitioning the show. Appreciate it. But Bryce Perkins too, 15.5 rushing yards for a guy that's going to play every snap, a guy that's incredibly mobile. Love that one.
I'm pulling up the app right now. Of course, The reason I was not able to pull up some of mine is because I'm getting a blank screen when I pull up Prize Picks. So I will just let the expert do his thing.
Those are
Matt, I
three I
pass this
like.
to you. Hit me with some more Prize Picks bets.
The fantasy points one for Haskins is the best one. But again, Perkins, I think, is solid. Anytime you can find like some of the condensed players, I think that's really where we want to go with this team. Unfortunately, they kind of ballooned the Rams receiving core at this point. If you were looking for any of them, I think Landon Akers at 22.5 would be the best one I'm looking at overall.
And Brandy is asking about Anthony Fursker for the early slate, but also misspelled it. We know what you're talking about, but Brandy spelled it Furkers.
I like that more.
Furkers, shut up, Furkers.
Yeah, he's a good tight end.
Yeah,
he's up there for tight ends on the early slate. Yeah,
gotcha. All right, we'll get there as well. Okay, now let's talk about some of these guys in the wide receiver 15 to 30 range. We got plenty of options if you want to go off the wall for picks here. Maybe some of these Baltimore guys are interesting. Mekhi Polk is in your top 10, but then below that, we got Raleigh Webb as a top 15 projected player. But then it really starts to flatten out. We got Benjamin Victor, who's had some run. And of course, everyone's favorite Isaiah Likely is going to be soaking up, of course, the most target share. We'll get there when we talk about the tight end position. Talk to me about the Ravens, though.
Ravens, another team with 6 receivers. They're just not going to throw the ball as much as some other teams. So you don't have quite as high of a projection as some of the other guys, but just know they're right there for upside. Mekhi Polk, 60% route rate. Solid. They just don't run as many pass plays. Raleigh Webb, 44%. That's solid too. Shamar Bridges, 43. Those would be the top 3 options for the Ravens for me. Benjamin Victor just behind him, 34% route rate for him. Not ideal, but still playable in tournaments.
So I'm not grinding the route rates and snap rates like you are for preseason. So would you say about that 55 to 60% route rate is considered elite for preseason usage from the wide receiver position? Anything above that?
Yes.
Okay, so when we're seeing something in the 80s, like Lance McCutcheon, like that's like crazy other level, 2 standard deviations different than the average.
Yeah, there's maybe 8 guys in the preseason that have that. I don't even know if it's that high. Maybe 5, and 3 of them play for New England. One of them's McCutcheon. It's ridiculous.
I think we need to make that point really clear because, we talk in like season-long fantasy football and even in DFS sometimes when we talk about clear positional advantages or value advantages compared to the rest of the field. Often we're talking about like these slates where there's just one elite tight end or something like that. When you're talking about one player who gets 20% more route share than any other player on the slate, or 2 players like that, you need to have that correctly calibrated within your lineup building process. If that value is so significantly different than everybody else, then we need to prioritize them, even if the rest of the field is prioritizing as well. That's a general DFS point, not just college football, but especially when we have such murky playing time for so many people. If you can eliminate that, that is really invaluable stuff. Okay, I digress here. I'm looking below. You have like Deion Kane for the Eagles below. Seth Williams. Now we're outside the top 20 wide receivers. Braylon Sanders of the Miami Dolphins.
We're like in GPP territory for these guys, I think. But one situation we should talk about is Arizona. There might be an error with them on the projections. I'll go back and make sure to just double check that quick. They project pretty well overall. It's fairly condensed, not as condensed as it's been in the past, but that all kind of rides on Andre Bocellia. But Andy Isabella has been solid and Greg Dortch has been solid. Those are 2 players you should certainly be looking at as well for that team. I'm going to go back and double check this because they should be higher than they are.
Gotcha. And I remember in your top plays video, definitely check that out on the Stokastic DFS channel. You were talking about this Arizona offense being a must target spot if you're playing that late slate. So that makes sense. And Greg Dortch, man, that's one where when I was grinding the rookie metrics, he stuck out to me. Obviously, he has some return capabilities, but I always thought that he could maybe stick as a wide receiver somewhere. And man, what a name. Andre Bocellia. Sounds like an opera singer.
Dortch was really productive in college. He was a solid player there. I thought he would at least stick on a roster. But he might have played himself into that. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he's a smaller guy, 5'7", 173. Didn't go to an elite school, Wake Forest. Didn't run fast, 4.59, but his metrics in school were actually pretty good.
So the classic Cliff Kingsbury archetype for a receiver.
But I feel like maybe I'm overestimating how much the league has changed. But I feel like there truly is a role for 5'8", 180 in the league in a way that there wasn't a couple years ago. These horizontal gadget players that, when used correctly, can actually have an opportunity. It's just that when they become every down players is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of the league at least put some stock into those players. Marquis Brown, first round pick. He just was traded for a lot of draft capital. Wan'Dale Robinson was a second round pick. I mean, you can even look at, we're getting a little difference here in terms of size, but even like Tyreek Hill's not huge.
That was the player I was kind of bringing up. He's a little taller, 5'10", 185, but
yeah, definitely not. He's certainly bigger than like Wan'Dale, but he's not too big himself.
Yeah. Producer Tyler saying, that bad things happen when you hit those people. And
tis true.
Yeah.
Luckily they don't take a lot of hits.
Yeah. That's interesting. Anybody else here? Maybe Seth Williams, Denver prospect. Kalen Geiger. I don't know who Kalen Geiger is for Tampa Bay. Is he going to play second half minutes?
Kalen Geiger. I think he's a little problematic just because they're going to look at some of the guys higher on their depth chart. Even if it's not Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they're going to play Brady a little bit. So maybe you see like more Jalen Darden, a guy they drafted 2 years ago. So does that hurt Geiger? I'm a little concerned about that. But I mean, like Geiger, he went to Texas Tech. He initially went to Troy, transferred there. He's another little guy. He doesn't have great athleticism or production in the college level for his size or age adjusted. So he's a little worrisome to me. I'm probably just going to try to stick to the more condensed spots. I think you could see extra receivers in Tampa Bay, which we haven't seen recently. And also, like, they're not a team that has condensed playing time to certain players. It's basically been every single receiver has at least a 30% route rate. Nobody has higher than 43%. So it's like, it's not condensed at all.
Interesting. And then the last people I see in your top 30 list that kind of stick out to me are two players who they're probably going to be the receiver 4 and 5 on their team, but I think one will make the final roster for the Miami Dolphins, but 2, they could be low-key contributors here and there. Mo Sanu Senior and Eric Ezukanma, who was an early camp darling. He's obviously been overshadowed by players like Dameon Pierce and Isaiah Likely, but like first week of camp, I was hearing all about Eric E making plays all over the field in Miami. You don't think he's going to play all that much. That's why you got him down here. But any chance he has 2 like monster plays and becomes the play of the slate?
Another Texas Tech guy, giving Texas Tech all the love. He is a 49% route rate. That's solid. It's just a little bit below some of those other guys that are up like 60, 65%. So if you're playing Miami, maybe if you're looking for a Skylar Thompson stack, I think he's the priority. Most of new would be right behind him.
There you go. Okay. And I know it's the early slate, but just like we were talking about Laviska, another one, Laquan Treadwell, already on his second team, first round draft capital.
Laquan Treadwell.
Maybe not even playable in preseason week 3 DFS.
What a guy.
Any last words on the wide receiver? We got 15 minutes left. We'll hit the tight end, and of course, we'll hit your questions right before lock.
No, I think that's pretty good at the top of the position. As always, if you have specifics, let us know.
Definitely. And subscribe to the channel. I told you early, tell you late. It really helps us out. Helps us with that YouTube algorithm, which I sadly have to say I read all about these days, working over here, but it really does help. Saying hello, saying we're idiots, asking who the best play is, commenting, liking, hitting that notification bell. Not only helps you, it really helps us. We really appreciate it. Some prize picks plays, timeout sports. You missed it, but Hassan Haskins over, I believe, six points, fantasy points was an easy over. Can you hit him one more time?
Yeah, I like Bryce Perkins. That's my other favorite one. I like essentially all the Haskins ones. So I just mix and match those. The fantasy points one's my favorite. And then Bryce Perkins. 14 and a half rushing yards. Looks like a 15 and a half, on Prize Picks. He's going to play the whole game.
Easy as that. Okay. Tight end position. Of course, we'll start early slate. We've got players like Jacob Harris, who we mentioned, Bryson Hopkins also going to play, Thaddeus Moss, Randy's son. Yeah. Randy's son playing for Cincinnati in that early slate. And from there, it's kind of a mess for that early part. Anybody else I missed?
No, it was a great question about Ferkser earlier. I think he's a good GPP pivot off the Rams guys. Again, Jacob Harris, you can play him at tight end. He's technically a receiver now. He was a receiver in college at UCF. And then Bryson Hopkins, he's also like a hybrid receiver. He doesn't really line up in line. So, I mean, we're talking about the Rams a lot for this early slate, but it's for a good reason. They have a clear role in the offense. Those, I think, are the two clear number one tight ends, followed by Ferkser, and the rest of it's pretty gross. Thad Moss, actually, you know what? Thad Moss should be right there too. He has a 40% route rate. He's a solid play too. Those would be the four tight ends I look at.
40% route rate, good enough for a preseason DFS tight end.
That's great for the tight end.
Yeah. We got Armani Rogers is someone you talked about in your early video of top plays today, because Washington is just really struggling with health at the tight end position. Logan Thomas just activated off the PUP list. We're not expecting him with any significant playing time today, if at all. Rogers kind of steps into a role where basically no one else but Thomas and him know the offense at this point.
Yeah, they just signed Kendall Blanton and Jake Hausman off the street. And I think that's more or less because you can't play, even practice, really. You can't practice with your team. You can't run scout team with one tight end on your roster. And Amari Rogers, you know, like, this guy's not even really a tight end. He played quarterback in college. He made the transition recently. And I don't know why Washington is such a thing for these guys. Logan Thomas was the same way, but he's been good.
There's like a mini academy now that Logan Thomas had set up while he got hurt. He's like the quarterback to tight end academy of Washington. I don't know, but
they're doing it.
Yeah,
they're doing it. 57 snaps for him at 37% route rate. You mentioned it earlier. That's good enough for a tight end.
All right. We definitely got to talk about the most controversial or the scariest name that's on this list, because people are taking Albert O as a serious fantasy football sleeper, like in the 11th or 12th round, but he's getting playing time in late preseason games. Please tell me that I should feel better about my best ball picks than I currently do, or is this bad?
The question is, who's going to play over him? The guy who got some hype in the summer, Greg Dulcich, has been hurt all at camp. Like, for a rookie to come out there and play week one is already like pretty far-fetched. Tight ends usually take some time. But then for a guy that missed essentially all of camp, like Eric Tomlinson, we know what he is. He's a rotational blocking specialist. Like, yes, Albert O is playing deep in the preseason, but like, who else is going to play?
So here's my galaxy brain concept with this, is that Albert O still hasn't had just a ton of NFL playing time because he got hurt early in his rookie season, and he's expected to have a huge route tree. So they literally just want to throw game speed plays at him because they have such a high expectation. Because like you said, who the heck plays over him? Are you telling me a mid day two tight end? Those players aren't typically ready for.
He's hurt, dude. He hasn't played it. He hasn't even played in camp. The guy, like, we're talking about Albert O's development. What is Dulcich's development like?
I mean, unless Dulcich, when he comes back, is like God's gift to tight ends, which I guess is possible, then Albert O has to play significant playing time for this Russell Wilson-led offense. So maybe not the absolute best play today, although you do have him in your top 5 tight ends. I still believe in season-long fantasy and best ball. Talk to me about the other preseason darling, I should say. Isaiah Likely, dude looks legit, and he's playing today for Baltimore. You playing him at all in DFS?
Yeah, I love him. Coastal Carolina is my favorite college. Went there. Guy was a complete wagon in school with Coastal. But man, I've lost a lot of money on him in preseason DFS. He has an identical route rate to Josh Oliver. 40% for both these guys. I believe he was on a short slate last week, and he was going to be heavily owned. And this has been the case through the first 2 preseason games. Oliver is also a receiving specialist. I don't think he's as good, but he's out there for the same opportunity. So tried to take the leverage route, tried to play the Oliver over Likely, and man, that did not work. Likely has been a star. He's an excellent receiving option. At this point, I'm just going to continue trying to mix these guys in because tight end is so volatile. I'll be playing both Oliver and Likely, but with how good Likely's been, he just projects a little bit better at this point.
Look, I've missed football a lot. I wanted to see something cool in the preseason. I've never seen a tight end juke somebody out like he did on that first catch in the first game. Like I feel like I was watching like a shifty running back. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just really fun when we see these guys come out of small schools like this and make an immediate impact, especially on a team that legitimately needs a secondary and tertiary receiving option. Like people have high hopes for Rashad Bateman. I do too. But outside of Bateman and, of course, Mark Andrews, this team really would like a solid receiving option, especially one that plays tight end with their multi-tight end sets. Let's move down the list a little bit here. Cade Otton, Trey McBride. Again, you mentioned Josh Oliver. Anybody else stick out in the late slate for you at the tight end position that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I like both those guys. And if you want to watch good Isaiah Likely highlights after the show, go watch his highlights versus Arkansas State. You also see Grayson McCall, who's probably going to get drafted next year. Little preview there. But anyway, tight end position. Cade Otton has a 40% route rate. It's actually the exact same as Likely. And I don't think we see a ton of Braid or Rudolph. They're going to play with Brady, however long Brady's out there. But then the tight ends behind him, like Cole Keith is a pure blocker. He's essentially a sixth lineman coming out of Minnesota. Otton is an actual two-way tight end that they drafted. And it's probably going to have to play for them at some point this year. Again, their tight end room isn't great now that Gronk's gone. I think he's solid. And then Arizona, it's not as condensed at tight end, but Trey McBride came back from the injury. He missed preseason week 1, immediately played 31 snaps. They're just looking to see what the rookie has. It's kind of like the Isaiah Likely situation and the Alberto situation where he hasn't had a lot of reps. So he's out there and he's running routes. So he's a decent flyer as well at the tight end position.
There we go. After that, and I know how it goes with this tight end position in preseason, like after like the first 8 players, you're talking about a 3 or below fantasy point projection. Guys, that's a really low probability play. Still possible in the preseason, but low probability. Let's spend some time here on the defenses. I know you often saying that we're just spraying and praying, kind of just mixing it up. But we do have the Falcons in the early slate projected for a pretty high number. The Browns stick out as a pretty high projection. Honestly, that Browns-Bears game is one that it looks like if you want a defense in that later slate, you want. But talk to me about defense in general on these two slates.
Yeah, so a lot of this is just going with the implied team totals, the Vegas odds. So in the early slate, Atlanta's a 7-point favorite over Jacksonville. That's a lot of what is driving that. If you're breaking ties, just because a lot of this is driven by the implied team totals, I'd look at who's facing the bad quarterbacks. So you run the risk in the Cleveland game of having Justin Fields play a half. Again, we don't know necessarily how long Fields going to be out there. The quote was up to a half. But say he plays that full half, he's probably playing the most meaningful snaps of anyone on this slate. He's going to be the best QB out there, maybe outside of Brady. So that could be bad for the Browns overall. You could look for like a GPP pivot off somebody a little lower on the list who's playing a worse quarterback. But again, this is driven by Vegas odds. Vegas is telling us the Browns are a pretty decent play today. They're 3-point favorites over the Bears still in a game with a good total. So, I mean, I'm not going to go against it. I'm not going to X out the Browns. But again, if you're playing one lineup or something, and you're trying to break a tie, those are the things I would consider.
Gotcha. And I'm looking at your projections here. It's flat enough at this position where if you wanted to use this as your way of getting unique, like you could just get super chalky with the highest projected players at the other positions. And then you're like, okay, and the Vikings defense and the Buccaneers defense, who are the, lowest projected defenses, but they're still at above 7 points. And the highest projected is below 10 points. There's enough variance in that position naturally where that's absolutely a fine way to be unique, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
Okay, cool. Well, I feel like it's pretty weirdly simple despite having a pretty large slate. Anybody in this mid tier though, like let's say the Commanders, Dolphins, Eagles, Cardinals tier, you got them all in like 8.3 to 8.5 range. Is there a GPP favorite amongst the group?
Let's see here. Let's just think about who's playing the worst quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That's what I always try to go for here. I mean, Minnesota has some pretty dang bad quarterbacks. Kellen Mond is horrific. They did get Nick Mullen, so we'll see how much he plays.
Oh,
Denver
true.
could be interesting for that reason. That's a bad quarterback room in Minnesota behind Cousins. I'd be interested in some flyers there.
Okay. Okay. Now we get to the fun part. Too Nice asked for it a few moments ago. Can we get a quick rundown of the top plays at each position for the early slate before it locks in a few minutes? So we'll start at the quarterback and just go right on down, Matt.
Yeah, top two on the early slate, Bryce Perkins, EJ Perry. We kind of gloss over EJ Perry because of how good Perkins projects, but Perry's going to play most of the game there. Those are their top two in the early slate. Night slate, I'm looking at McSorley, Willis, and then I like Skylar Thompson as kind of a GPP dart throw. For the running back position, Hassan Haskins and Keontae Ingram are the top two for me. On the early slate, it's kind of volatile up there, but I think you're looking at Chris Evans and Mekhi Sargent. At tight end, this is a very volatile position, but in the early, it's the Rams guys, Jacob Harris, Bryson Hopkins, Thad Moss would be a decent GPP play. On the night slate, like Armani Rogers, Isaiah Likely, of course, we have to like him. Josh Oliver, solid pivot, though. I'm going to keep trying. Same route rate, just hasn't worked. We're going to give it a shot, though. Otherwise, McBride would be right there for me. Receiver on the early slate, play your Rams, play your Rams, play your Rams, and then play Jeff Cotton, Kwame Lassiter. For the night slate, Arizona has pretty good projection here. Andy Isabella leading that group, Mike Harley for Cleveland, and then like a Mekhi Polk for Baltimore. Those are the solid options at receiver.
What a beast. What a beast. Just rolling through it. Favorite showdown play for Jacksonville versus Atlanta, even if you don't have the salaries up there. I assume Perry's way up there. He's projected for 3 more points than any other player on the list. Anybody else just from that game alone?
That is correct. He's number one for me there. I would go to Mekhi Sargent too.
And the very best QB play on the entire slate, Jay Lopez asked.
Bryce Perkins. I mean, assuming you're talking about early.
I believe so. Why don't we say the late as well? Why not?
Late slate, I think the best play is Malik Willis.
That Tennessee game, real interesting because
Trace McSorley is right there, though. We're splitting hairs.
Haskins and Willis, man. Those rushing quarterbacks actually positively correlate with their running backs. If they both get a high opportunity share, maybe they both hit in a day like today. We've seen it in regular season DFS, that's for sure.
Yeah, we have.
Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry have been on Million Maker lineups together. Now we just got the B version, Malik Willis and Hassan Haskins. That's exactly what we want. Oh, man. Thank you, Matt, for all the expertise. We are at 1 minute till lock. Any final questions we got? Any breaking news we have? Checking things out here as we go. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. Make sure to like the channel. Please subscribe. Hit that notification bell as well. Follow him, please, at Matt_Gajewski on Twitter, keeping you updated on every single preseason and regular season slate. I am at Draftaholic. Any last we have any like 30 seconds here. Any last words for the people here, Matt?
Again, thank you guys for watching. We're here talking preseason DFS. Never thought this is something we would have the opportunity to talk about, but you guys make it possible. So always thankful to be doing this for you guys. I love it. You give me a chance to do what I love. So thank you guys for being here. Let's have a day. Football's on today.
And you're a beast at it, man. Let's have a day. Follow him again, Matt_Gajewski. Follow us not only below at the Stokastic DFS channel, but we got the Odd Shopper channel helping you with all your betting needs. We've got the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel helping you win your draft and your league. And we got the Stokastic Best Ball channel helping you out with all of your NFL best ball needs. We are at 3 o'clock. We are at early game lock. We got an exciting day of preseason football. Let's hope it's healthy and exciting for all. He's Matt. I'm Matt for producer Ty. We've also got 2 live before locks before I say goodbye. Coming up, we've got NASCAR live before lock at 5 p.m. with Terry and Chris. And then at 6, we got MLB live before lock with Terry and Gundacker. So for Matt, for Tyler, I'm Matt as well. We'll see you guys later.